Great to see everybody, and I'm glad I can actually see you, and that's good. I like that. Linda says tell you hello, and we send our greetings to you. So we're gonna see if this will work for us for the next few Sundays. I want to read you, to begin with this morning, a series of quotes from various sources. William Shakespeare wrote the following. He said, "The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool." Scientist Isaac Asimov said, "The saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom." Another writer said, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself." Another writer said, "I am not young enough to know everything." And finally, from the wisdom of Confucius, he said, "He who knows all the answers has not been asked all the questions." I like that. Now, I begin with those quotes because our next sermon series, we're going to be looking at the subject of wisdom. And our text for this series of lessons is going to be the book of Proverbs. So if you want to dig around and read out of the book of Proverbs over the next month or so, that would probably be a very good thing to do. We will be looking at a variety of texts from that book. In this first lesson, I just want us to think about why we have the book of Proverbs. Why do we have this book? In a sense, it's an easy question to answer. And we probably could say, well, it's a book of life instructions, and it's meant to produce wisdom in the person who is reading it. And of course, there's probably a lot more to Proverbs than that, but I think that little answer illustrates the idea. Wisdom is at the heart of this book. And so if you paid any attention to the 5 quotes that I started this lesson with, you may have noticed that there is something of a theme present in those quotes. And I'm sure that this theme would not necessarily show up in every quote about wisdom, but it does in a lot of them. And that theme is something like this, that wisdom seems to be something that we attain by recognizing that we don't have it. Does that make sense to you? Wisdom is something that we attain by recognizing that we don't have it. In some ways, we might say that wisdom is an elusive target. It's always moving, and we're ever chasing after it, hoping that we can secure it for ourselves, and we might get a little bit of it. But real wisdom always moves ahead of us, and to be wise, we really need to know that this is something that we're going to be chasing for the rest of our lives. So today I want us to look at the first 7 verses of chapter 1. I'm going to put these up on the screen, and we'll read them together if you want to. This is from the New American Standard. "The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth knowledge and discretion. The wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel, to understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." So with those few verses, we begin our look at the book of Proverbs, and really more specifically a look at the idea of wisdom, and hopefully how we can acquire a little more of it than we currently possess. Let's talk about the Proverbs of Solomon. Solomon was a good choice to write a book about wisdom. He is generally known as one of the wisest men ever to live, one of the people who God has blessed in the ability to understand life, to understand how things work, to understand what causes trouble, what brings blessing, the kind of characteristics that create a person that is not only pleasing to God, but also brings about the greatest amount of success. And I think if we approach wisdom that way, I believe it will help us a great deal. In a famous passage, we learn that Solomon's wisdom was not merely hard-earned, but it was also a gift to Solomon from God. I want to read from 1 Kings chapter 3, beginning in verse 5. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God said, "Ask what you wish me to give you." Then Solomon said, "You have shown great loving kindness to your servant David, my father, according as he walked before you in truth and righteousness and uprightness of heart toward you. And you have reserved for him this great loving kindness, that you have given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. Yet I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. Your servant is in the midst of your people, which you've chosen, a great people who are too many to be numbered or counted. So give your servant an understanding heart to judge, your people to discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" It was pleasing in the sight of the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. God said to him, "Because you have asked this thing and have not asked for yourself long life, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked for the life of your enemies, but you have asked for yourself discernment to understand justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. Behold, I have given you a wise, discerning heart, so that there has been no one like you before you, nor shall one like you arise after you. I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there will not be any among the kings like you in all your days. If you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and commandments as your father David walked, then I will prolong your days." Then Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream, and he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and made peace offerings and made a feast for all his servants. And then one more passage from 1 Kings, this one in chapter 4, beginning at verse 29. Now God gave Solomon wisdom and very great discernment and breadth of mind, like the sand that is on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the sons of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal. And his fame was known in all the surrounding nations. He also spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon, even to the hyssop that grows on the wall. He spoke also of animals and birds and creeping things and fish. Men came from all peoples to hear the wisdom of Solomon, from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. Now, that's quite a commendation that we read about concerning King Solomon. A wonderful thing. He becomes king, and I suppose, as most kings might do, he would have asked for a lot of things: power, wealth, control of his people. Those are generally speaking the things that kings are concerned about. He could have asked for military victories so his people would have been secure. He could have asked for economic success so that not only he would be wealthy, but maybe the nation as a whole would be wealthy as well. Again, those are things that kings, rulers of all sorts, have as concerns for themselves. But Solomon did not ask those kinds of things. Instead, as he stood before God, he made the simple confession Look, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm putting words in Solomon's mouth, but that seems to me the kind of thing he was trying to say to God. I'm like a little child here. You've made me king over this great people of yours. What in the world am I going to do with them? I don't know how to be a king. I've never been a king before. How does a king act? What does a king do? How does a king make decisions? I need some help here. So what he asked for was the ability to discern between good and bad, that which would be helpful and beneficial and that which would be harmful. That kind of prayer, that desire in Solomon's heart, I think not only speaks well of Solomon, it evidences maybe that there was already present in this young man a level of wisdom that maybe nobody was able to recognize at that moment. It was certainly wise to ask of God that he help you be even more wise. That's a pretty wise thing to do. Probably the wisest thing that a ruler could ask for. So that's, with that introduction, I believe it's necessary for us to remember who wrote most of these proverbs that we're going to look at. Why do we need to consider the writer? Well, here we have a book that purports to instruct us on the subject of wisdom. It contains information designed to help us understand life better. It's designed to help us know how to navigate our way through the ups and downs, the hills and the valleys and the crooks and the turns of living through this life. It's a book that says that it is going to help us do all of these things and to do it in the best way possible. Again, not only in a way to please God, but also in the most successful way to get through life. So why do we need to know about the fellow who wrote this stuff? I don't think this is hard. Would you want to purchase a book on wisdom written by a guy who didn't know how to do anything, who wasn't wise himself? Would you want a book written by an absolute fool to try to help you understand about wisdom? Probably not. And so we begin this little series on wisdom by at least acknowledging Solomon and the kind of man that he was, and to note the fact that God blessed him especially with the gift of wisdom. And so when we read the Proverbs that Solomon wrote, which are intended to be instructions in wisdom, then I think we can read them with confidence that what we're taking into our minds and our hearts are the kind of things that can help us. This is a man who knows what he's talking about. This is a man who understands about life and living. This is a man who is able to note the difference between the right road and the wrong road. And that's the kind of fella that we want to get information from to help ourselves. So why then did Solomon think that he wrote these Proverbs? Well, I'm going to read you the first 7 verses again, and I'm going to read them out of a different version. This is from the New Century Version. Not a bad little translation. It's not one of those I would necessarily depend on for deep Bible study, but sometimes it's a great version just to read so you can get a sense of what the writer is trying to get at. And I like the way that this particular version puts these 7 verses. These are the wise words of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. They teach wisdom, self-control. They will help you understand wise words. They will teach you how to be wise and self-controlled, and will teach you to do what is honest and fair and right. They will make the uneducated wise and give knowledge and sense to the young. Wise people can also listen and learn. Even they can find good advice in these words. When anyone can understand wise words, stories, the words of the wise and their riddles, knowledge begins with respect for the Lord, but fools hate wisdom and discipline. So wisdom is what we're after. And this is an interesting topic. Wisdom is one of those things in one way or another has been the subject of philosophers and a lot of theologians, a lot of people who try to understand life and expound on it. Wisdom is pretty much behind maybe the majority of what scholars and others are attempting to achieve in life. I read one little piece written by a fellow named Trimper Longman, who's a theologian, who's written some commentaries and other books. But here's what he says about wisdom. He said, wisdom is the skill of living. It is a practical knowledge that helps one know how to act and how to speak in different situations. Wisdom entails the ability to avoid problems and the skill to handle them when they present themselves. Wisdom also includes the ability to interpret other people's speech and writing in order to react correctly to what they're saying to us. Wisdom is not intelligence, pure and simple. It does not necessarily exclude intelligence, but that is not the focus. Proverbs itself attributes wisdom to a series of animals, not because they have great intelligence, but because they know how to navigate life well. If you read the book of Proverbs, you'll run across creatures like ants, who are pretty wise, or badgers, or locusts, or lizards even. It's interesting what the wisdom writer Solomon learned from these simple little creatures. He believed that they understood some things about life that we could benefit from. And so, again, the question is, why do we read Proverbs? Well, we read Proverbs in order to be wiser than we are. However wise you may think that you are, my best advice is don't go too far with that. Wisdom always seems to be something that is much better attributed to you by another person than it is for you to claim for yourself. There are a lot of things like that, but wisdom is certainly in that category of things that are best said about us by somebody else, rather than something that we ourselves brag on. So, looking at those first few verses of the book of Proverbs, I think there are 7 things that we could say about the book itself, kind of as a general, 7 general statements, 7 things that we need to look for as we go through this book. Number 1 would be this. Proverbs intentionally teach wisdom and instruction. They teach us how to be wise. Wisdom does not seem to come simply because we've been around a while. Now, I think that sometimes living a long time at least gives you the opportunity to develop some wisdom, but living a long time does not guarantee wisdom. And so wisdom is something that we need to learn. It is not a skill that we are born with. It is something that you can learn. And so if you want to be wise, the best thing that you can do is seek out good, solid instruction. And here's an entire book written by a man who was gifted by God himself, blessed with a lot of wisdom. So that's number 1. Proverbs teaches wisdom and instruction. Number 2 is this. It will help you understand wise words. It will help you understand wise words. Now, you may not at first think that that's such a big deal, but I believe it's huge because we live in a day and age that is so completely unlike the days of Solomon. I can't think of very many good ways to make a contrast that makes sense. But we live in an information age. We live in the day of the internet. We live in the day when a word spoken on the other side of the world can travel at the speed of light just about and end up in your ear within seconds of being spoken. And not only is communication fast, we're inundated with words. Words are everywhere. I don't know. I can't remember. I read several years ago, just on average, how many advertising messages that we are exposed to daily, and it's like in the thousands. You can't listen to the radio. You can't turn on your television. You can't do anything without hearing somebody trying to get your attention and tell you something. We're in the day of the 24-hour, 365-day-a-year news cycle. You can turn on your TV or your radio any time of the day and night and be brought up to date immediately on events around the world. Some of that is good news reporting, and some of it may be crackpot news reporting. I mean, and that's the problem. We are simply overloaded with information in our day and age. There's probably never been a time in the history of human beings where it is important for a person to be able to understand the difference between a wise word and a foolish word than it is today. Now, we really need that because there's a lot of foolishness that's being spouted, and this foolishness is often spouted under the guise of being wisdom. And we have to be able to note whether that is actual wisdom or whether it's just a lot of baloney. And so Proverbs will help us understand wise words. Number 3 is this. Proverbs will instruct us in wise behavior. And then I want you to pay particular attention to 3 words that Solomon used in talking about this. It's not just wise behavior, but there are 3 other words, and the words are righteousness, justice, and equity. Righteousness, justice, and equity. And I dare say that those are 3 words that probably have a lot more importance as far as Scripture is concerned than most of us are aware of. We may know that these words are in our Bibles, but we may not know the emphasis that Scripture puts on things like righteousness, justice, and equity. Those are words that have to do with the way that we behave, especially in ways that we behave toward God or in ways that we behave toward one another. And so it becomes really important that our behavior be governed by things like righteousness, justice, and equity. I will tell you, a lot of the world's problems would disappear if human beings could learn to behave according to these words as we interact with one another. So Proverbs is going to help us understand what wise behavior is, and it's going to encourage us to behave in those ways. Number 4 is this. Proverbs will give shrewdness to simple people. I like the way to put it in those words. It's going to give shrewdness to simple people. Listen, why do we need a book that will help us to be shrewd? Well, I hate to tell you this, but most of the world is out to take advantage of you. Did you know that? Most of the world is out to take advantage of you. Most of the world is not looking out for your best interest. Most of the world is looking out for, old number one, and number one is not you. Number one is the other guy. Most of the world, given the opportunity, will take from you all that it can. Sometimes making you believe that it is only taking the minimum, while at the same time blessing you in some way in return, only to find out later that none of that was true at all. You were taken in, you were taken advantage of, you were used and abused. And that's the world that we live in. That's the same world that human beings have lived in ever since Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden. We've had to wrestle with those same problems. And so simple people who are not necessarily worldly wise, people who don't necessarily have insight into the machinations of the world around them. Simple people just trying to live their life and get from one day to the next and do the best they can. The book of Proverbs can help a person like that become shrewd. Now, not in the sense of shrewd to take advantage of the next guy, but shrewd in the sense of understanding how life works, so that you can be ready to deal with what comes your way and to not be taken advantage of nearly as much as you otherwise would be. Number 5 is this. Proverbs gives young people knowledge and discretion. Let's all smile at that. Just smile at that. And if you don't know why I would say smile at that, I'm just going to encourage you to think back when you were young, because we were all there at one time. Some of you may still be in the younger years of your life, but most of us can remember the time when we thought we knew it all. Young people have a tendency. They reach a certain age, and when they reach a certain age, they know everything. They know more than mom and dad. They know more than their teachers. They know more than everybody. It is a common malady that strikes just about all young people to one extent or another. Why do we need Proverbs? Well, because we older folks know that the young folks don't really know as much as they think they know. And we know it because we once thought we knew it all and had to learn the sad lesson of life that we did not know it all. So Proverbs can help young people attain the kind of knowledge that they need to have to develop the sort of discretion in life that marks a wise person. That's what they need. And it's what older people still need, but young people in a very special way sometimes need a good dose of knowledge and discretion. Number 6, Proverbs enables a wise man to become even more wise. And I like that. And this goes back to what I said earlier on about wisdom being sort of an elusive target. It's always moving on us. About the time we think that we've attained some level of wisdom, real wisdom moves ahead yet even more. The wise person recognizes that. It's not that they can't appreciate the knowledge and the wisdom that they have attained in life. It's just they understand there's always something else to learn. There's always more insight to gain. There's a little bit more to becoming a truly wise person. You will never reach the end of this chase to attain wisdom. And so Proverbs helps a wise man become even more wise. And then number 7 is this. It gives wise counsel to those who already understand a lot. This is something that I came to appreciate years ago when I used to do a lot of counseling, ran a counseling center. I met weekly, every Monday morning. I met with a group of counselors, and that was probably one of the best things personally that I have ever participated in. It was good simply because it helped me work through a lot of things that I was struggling with. And I'm not necessarily talking about my own personal struggles, but as a counselor, here I am trying to help other people. I'm trying to guide people who don't know which direction to go. I'm trying to help people work through hardships, difficulties, all kinds of disastrous and tragic things. How do you do that? I quickly came to realize that I was not the repository of all helpful information that everybody in the neighborhood needed to have. But when I gathered with that other group of individuals, we could share things, sometimes very common things. We could share together. We could talk about stuff. We could work through it. And wise counsel enabled me to become a wiser counselor. Now, the writer of Proverbs is suggesting to us that if you're one of those people who've lived for a while and you've already developed a level of knowledge and wisdom, that's great. But Proverbs can help you become even more wise. And that counsel that you gain from the wisdom of Solomon and from others is the kind of thing that's going to increase in your own life things that would be beneficial for yourself. Now, I will bring this lesson to a close with verse 7. Verse 7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." Well, that's probably one of the wisest statements ever. Fear of the Lord, beginning of wisdom. A good, healthy respect for the Lord never hurt anybody. In fact, I think that's where real knowledge, understanding about life, real wisdom has its roots, is in the fear of the Lord. We acknowledge God as being God. We acknowledge the Creator for being the Creator that He is. We acknowledge the all-knowing God as being the one who does indeed know all. That's not us. We need His help. And so this is where real knowledge begins. But there are certain individuals, a lot of individuals, I don't know if we should say the majority of individuals, but oftentimes it certainly seems to be the case, who might best be described as fools. They're not interested in fearing the Lord. They have no respect for God. Many of them have no belief in God at all, and even if they do believe in God, they're not necessarily all that interested in God. And so they're trying to develop wisdom based on their own faulty foibles of life, but based on their own mistakes. And yes, you can certainly learn some things from your mistakes. Would it be better to learn it before you made the mistakes? Would it be better to learn even if you make mistakes? Would it be best to have a wise man help you move past those mistakes? This is where the fear of the Lord is beneficial to us. Foolishness never blessed a single person in the world. Being a fool is not something to be proud of. And yet, honestly, so many people live their lives as fools, have no respect for God, and thus they miss the greatest blessing of life that comes through the instruction that God has given to all of us through men like Solomon to help us understand wisdom. And all that starts with a healthy fear of God. Thank you for listening this morning. It's really good to see everybody. I'm so happy to be able to be with you in this way. And I know it's not the optimum, but it is a way for us to be away from Biloxi and still be able to handle things like the sermon. And we'll do tonight class. We will not meet here. You will not meet where you are on Wednesday evening. Wednesdays will be strictly a Zoom class. And if you don't have the link, Linda will send it out, or you can find it on our church Facebook page. Thank you so much. Blessings to all of you. Miss you already, but we're about to enjoy some family time up here. And so thank you for allowing us to be away. Bless you all. I guess you're going to be led in an invitation song. I think I heard that being announced. Y'all sing that song, and I will see you again soon.